Hello and welcome to the PvE-Gamer. Today we are redoing a video that I already recorded in German. I recently recorded some theories about PvE in a video, and one of the comments, one of the fans expressed his disappointment that the video was only available in German. So we are going to do this again, and this time in English, so everyone can enjoy it. This is a bit of an A/B test. How do people like the content? How do the people like the content in English? Do they prefer the content in German? And let's see what happens and what the responses are. But for now, let's record this video in German. And we start with a preview card. United we stand. And this kicked off a bit of a discussion because when we read the card, we can identify when this defends together with a card from hand if Bolton is in your party. And this is the first time that we see the term party here and have a card that is tailored towards PvE. We already had cards which were tailored a bit more towards PvE, but it never has been so obvious as in this case of United We Stand. So this kicked off a discussion in the Flesh and Blood TCG Germany channel. So thank you to Mike Keegan, Gorganian, Granola, and Peter of Ether for their inputs. And some of the following thesis, nothing of this is confirmed, this is just speculation, is based on this discussion that happened in the Flesh and Blood TCG Germany channel. So let's kick off everything with thesis number one. PvE will see a very slow introduction. So if we look at existing sets like Tales of Aria and Korsham, for example, or the Great Library of Solana, even Coax a Commotion, a pretty early card from Crucible of War, we see that there is a very high potential for PvE and for having a good use in PvE. And so we had a number of cards which trickled very slowly into the sets, and now we have primarily now we have for the first time a card primarily tailored toward PvE because you can play the card in PvP, but obviously it isn't very good there. So the question is now, how will we continue? How will PvE be introduced? James White already said that we will not see PvE in 2023, but perhaps we will see some kind of sneak preview. So the most common opinion is, and this is also a very elegant way of introducing PvE, is we just continue to receive booster sets. And inside these booster sets, we have cards which are tailored a bit more towards PvP, a bit more towards PvE. But the difficulty with that is that we will receive some cards which are pretty worthless to players which just want to focus on PvE. For PvP, that is not that much of a problem because with bad cards you can still play drafts and play sealed. But as a PvE player, there are some wordings on cards which make them totally useless in certain PvE scenarios and settings, and more about that later. What could happen is that we see a history pack PvE that would also address some concerns with reprints. For example, we have very strong cards which are only available in older sets. They could be reprinted in a potential history pack PvE. Again, pure speculation. And in parallel, we could receive sets for bosses and scenarios which are played as armories or as separate products that we can purchase. So, thesis number two, the format. How often can we play a card? I also addressed this in an earlier video, but at the moment we don't know how often we will be allowed to play a card. The best guess is if we have a hard look at Blitz and the available pre-constructed decks, I would heavily suggest that we have 2 of each card at minimum and not a Highlander format, just because you can then pick up a blitz deck and play it. This would be a very good introduction into PvE. So you have a set for an antagonist, you just pick your favorite hero. It's a rather cheap entry point and you can go and play. Depending on the difficulty of the PvE opponent and of the bosses, it could also be Highlander because we have very strong card draw, but this would go against the thesis of making the most out of these pre-constructed decks and the starter decks. But this would keep the difficulty in check. Alternatively, perhaps we can play cards even more often. For example, 3 times, like in Classic Constructed, but then we get different difficulty levels. This is to address the concerns of entry-level players, which just have the pre-constructed decks and some boosters, and also give a challenge to these hardcore veterans who own all the cards and have very strong options for card draw and similar. So let's go to thesis number 4. Will we get real PvE or will we get a one versus many scenario like in the World of Warcraft TCG decks? So let's take a look at some cards that we saw on Twitter. I got linked this information and we see here there's just a beat up card like in Street Fighter 6 where you have a bonus stage where you just deal damage as fast as possible. This would also be the same as a gear check in an MMORPG where you have to deal as much damage as you can before the boss goes into a rage mode and you basically lose any chance of being successful. And we see some cards which are reactions. So these cards would hint at a full and real PvE. This means everyone plays together versus an automated deck. And for example, we have games like this in Eon's End. So this is the wrong one. This is the World of Warcraft TCG, but this is Eon's End. Eon's End is a cooperative boss battler, non-TCG, or where you rally with your friends and try to beat some bosses together, and the deck is automated. This has been created by Magic the Gathering veteran, former Magic the Gathering player who created this game. I like it very much. It has very interesting mechanics, and this is an example for full PvE. On the other hand, we would have something like the World of Warcraft trading card game, which is also very popular, but is in, at least in my opinion, not true PvE because one person has to play the antagonist. This could, however, be very successful as the WoW, World of Warcraft, raid decks, where people did like these decks a lot, and it also holds the power level in check. For example, if you think at the Great Library of Solana, you have an active discard mechanic to destroy it, and this is something that full and true PvE cannot do. You can have card effects that destroy all landmarks or something, but you cannot have a player actively destroy this library, and this would be possible in a scenario where a real person plays the antagonist and the boss, so not true PvE. This would also match the demand for armories. So you have a couple of friends and you visit at the armory, and there's a designated boss player that perhaps distributes some loot after the game and could receive a prize similar to the judge packs we saw for playing the antagonist. So there are some scenarios where this could work very well. On the other hand, and this is the downside, there's no real differentiation with the competitors. If you look at Final Fantasy, the card game, they do the same. They have bosses which have to be played by real persons. And so this would not be something truly new, something truly inventive, and would not be a revolution of the TCG sector. And also, this is a very bad setting for 2 players. So imagine you have a friend who plays Flesh and Blood, and you want to play PvE. You actually cannot do this because you would have to solo the boss and then switch roles, and this isn't really fun. or you would have to visit an armory. And there are some people which don't have the time or just don't want to go to armories. So two players, if you have two players, you're in a very bad spot with one versus many. Now, on the other hand, let's look again at true PvE. If you have true PvE, you get a new group and a new target group, which are the solo players and the players who don't want to play in stores in general or are so have to care for the family or stay at home, have young kids at home, etc., and just cannot visit armories no matter how much they would like to. And this is a target group that you would have as a target group. And some of the new Kickstarter games are tailored towards solo modes and solo play. So this is rather attractive option at the moment. And it would be a real innovation because at this point in time, there is no true collectible card game PvE mode. We had some experiments, like Magic the Gathering had 3 sets against the Hydra versus the Horde and Defeat the God. Those were 3 decks in the Thanos block, which were true PvE. We can take a look at them at another time on this channel. They got stale a bit fast, but were quite fun. And if we had very good and true PvE, so that no one has to play the boss, this would be a real innovation and a real interesting turn of events. The demo deck from 2020 rather hints at PvE, but then again, it is from 2020. There could be so many changes that we can't really take this as indicator that we will get true PvE and not one versus many. In theory, true PvE is possible. There's a fan-generated variant for PvE already out there. I think Red Zone Rogue and other creators already played this variant, and this is also real PvE. So the fifth thesis is, if we have full PvE, or even if we have one versus many, people should have a reason to open boosters. So it would be great if we see a sealed or draft variant, and you could create sales which are not dependent on events and armories if we get full PvE. And so you can sit at home in the evening solo, just crack open 5 boosters and see how far you can go in the full PvE scenario, either alone, with a friend, or with more friends if you have them. So that's our look and thesis and speculation about PvE. I'm very much looking forward towards the new set and towards PvE in general. Let's hope that we get a glimpse or preview even in 2023.